Hey, it's Alexander. So today I am going to be fat washing some Elijah Craig small batch bourbon with some Kerrygold butter. The whole process here is to give the bourbon that you're fat washing a nice velvety texture while implementing those flavors you get from whatever fat you're using. Now you can use all different kinds of fats, whether it be olive oil, coconut fat, butter, beef tallow, bacon fat. You can use anything out there. It's a really cool process, but today I'm using butter and bourbon. So for this recipe, I'll be using an entire 750 milliliter bottle of bourbon. So I'll be using half a stick's worth of butter. I'm gonna heat that up on my induction top here. Make sure it's fully melted. We'll be using Elijah Craig small batch bourbon. We'll go ahead and add that to our pot with the melted butter. And we'll save the bottle for later. Now we'll give it a nice stir to make sure it's all mixed in properly. And next we'll be transferring it to this jar. Make sure we don't drop any on the countertop. Now we're going to seal it up and give it a good shake. Next, we'll transfer it to the freezer overnight. And this recipe is Zoe approved. All right, so now it's the next day. Let's go look in the freezer and see what it looks like. All right, let's check it out. So this is what your fat wash should look like. The whole reason why we do the freezing process when we're fat washing a spirit is because when it gets cold, the fat will re-solidify and you can separate it a little bit easier from the spirit. Now you'll only need a few things to actually separate these. A lot of people will flip the jar upside down and freeze them so that all the fat floats to the top, and then they flip it right side up and the fat's at the bottom. It's a little bit easier that way. I'll just be poking a hole through the butter and then straining it through a cheesecloth. But for the best results, if you have the time, use a coffee filter because it will strain all those little small particles out of there and leave you with a nice clear, velvety, butter washed bourbon. So you'll need your container that you're gonna be straining into. You'll need a double strainer and a cheesecloth. Now they do make different mesh levels and fineness for cheesecloth. This one's pretty fine, so I'm not going to double layer it, but if yours is really, really see-through and it has larger holes in it, just go ahead and double layer it. Show you a little trick I learned. If you can't get a lid off of a jar, that should come right off. There we go. So now we're just going to poke a hole right along the side there to let that bourbon flow through the butter. And now we're going to pour this directly into the cheesecloth. Now I'm also going to pull the butter into the cheesecloth and squeeze all the bourbon out of it because there is still quite a bit in there that's just hanging out in the butter. So I'll let this sit for a moment and strain out the rest, and then I'll give it a nice squeeze through the cheesecloth. And while I wait for this to strain out, I'm actually going to label my bottle real quick. So I have my empty bottle of Elijah Craig small batch, and I have my label maker as well. All right, it says Kerrygold butter washed bourbon. Now the whole reason I'm labeling this before I put the fat washed bourbon into this bottle is because it is extremely cold and it will cause condensation on the outside of the bottle, which makes it really hard to stick new labels onto the bottle. All right, now I've got my label on the bottle. All right, so now that this is mostly strained, I'm gonna tie up the cheesecloth a little bit and give it a good squeeze. Now, another cool thing about this process is that you're left with a bourbon washed butter as well. So you can use that in baking. I've had a friend make banana pudding from it before. I've heard of snickerdoodles being made with it. I've spread it on toast before. It tastes like you're eating bourbon. If you're into that, I am. It is still extremely alcoholic, so if you use it in any recipes and you don't want that to come out alcoholic, make sure you cook it first. All right, so I'm just going to throw this butter into a new jar for now. And for anyone who may question why I have so many of these jars, I actually used to brew a lot of honey wine back in the day. Even after giving a lot of these jars away or repurposing them for other things, I still have nearly 25 of them laying around. So anytime I get a chance to use one, I'm happy about it. All right, so now we have our butter washed bourbon and our bourbon infused butter. This stuff does come out a little grainy. It almost kind of looks like sand. You can remelt it and reconstitute it back into a traditional stick of butter. It won't be perfect because the bourbon has pulled out a lot of the fats from the butter, but you can still use it in tandem with regular butter to get a really nice effect. And again, the flavor is very strong of bourbon. I always recommend just using it in tandem with regular butter. So as you can see, this is still really cloudy. So I've decided to go ahead and put it through a coffee filter to get it a little bit more clear. You don't have to do this. You can use this product right here, but in a bar setting, I do prefer to have it a little bit more clear just for presentation. So we'll just place the coffee filter in the double strainer and we will slowly pour the fat wash bourbon over the coffee filter. Be careful not to send it over the edge of the coffee filter, or else it will not filter. And again, this does take quite a while, so this is just going to be something passive that I'm doing. All right, so now that this has had time to sit here and strain through this coffee filter, it is nice and clear. Let me just go ahead and remove this and I'll show it to you. So here is what we're left with. It actually just looks like a bowl of whiskey, because it is a bowl of whiskey. This is completely clear, just like it was before we ever butter washed it. So now I'm gonna transfer this back into another container and back into the bottle. Pour it into this container to make it a little easier to get into the bottle. And then I'll put it back into this bottle. No funnels required. All right, so here we have it. This is our butter washed Elijah Craig small batch. And as you can see, it is just slightly more cloudy than the regular small batch. I actually have a little bit in another bottle. Let me compare it real quick. Now there is just a little bit left in this bottle here. This is the original stuff. This is the butter wash. You can tell a little bit of a difference. This is a lot more crystal clear, but this has been butter washed. It has a slight cloudiness to it. Now I'm gonna do a side-by-side taste comparison, just tasting a little bit of each one, and I'll tell you what I can taste. All right, so I have my two Glencairns here. I'm gonna put the regular small batch right here. Now, small batch Elijah Craig is actually one of my favorite bourbons out there. And then next to it, I'll pour on the butter wash. All right, so first up, I've had this plenty of times, but I'm just gonna tell you what I can taste and give you a breakdown of it. So this bottle here is very sweet. It's very nutty. It's one of the reasons why I like it so much. And it has like a maple afternote in there that lingers for a little while, almost like a maple icing donut. Really, really nice, but not as sweet as I'm making it sound. It is very well balanced and not sugary, sugary sweet. More on the aromatics than the tongue. Get just a little bit of water to clear my palate. And next we have my butter wash Elijah Craig small batch. Now this, again, these are the same bottles originally. This is just the one that I've butter washed with Kerrygold butter. Let's give it a taste. So you immediately get hit with that salinity from the butter. Now you can use non-salted butter if you don't want that salinity. I actually really do like salt in cocktails. It makes the flavors mend really well. There's a whole thing about it. Look up saline and do some research on it. But right after that salinity hits you, you get this really nice sweet butterscotch taste that just lingers the entire time. The butter really enhances the nuttiness of Elijah Craig's small batch, and it really helps show that characteristic, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. It's got notes of popcorn, butterscotch, obviously some butter, and it has a nice oily and smooth texture to it. This particular butter wash can be used in plenty of different cocktails. I actually have one that's featured in the bar that I'm working at right now. It's called Granny's Drunk Again. I will have to feature that sometime on this channel once we change menus, but I don't want to give my recipe away just yet. But all in all, this is absolutely delicious. I highly recommend trying this. If you don't want to use an entire bottle, you don't have to. I know that my ratios for this are 1 stick per bottle. So if you go to a pint, use about half a stick, it'll be fine. But get out there, get curious, try some different fat washes and let me know what you think of them. I'm always willing to try some more in the future. I know that I've coconut fat washed some Appleton Estate rum before. It was absolutely delicious and nice and smooth, just like this, but it didn't have that butteriness. It had that coconut flavor, and it was like a non-sweet version of that sickeningly sweet Malibu that you can get at the store. But hey, thanks for watching. I hope you've learned something, and I hope you try butter washing soon because I highly, highly recommend it. And I'll probably be using this in a video pretty soon to show you how to showcase it in a cocktail. So make sure you subscribe and you look out for that video. And I'll catch you in the next one.